Welcome everyone to Promethean Action's live question and answer show. We do this show every Thursday at 11 a.m. Thank you for tuning in. This is actually going to be our 11th show. That's almost 3 months worth of shows now. If you've been tuning in for these shows as we've been doing them, we'd like to thank you very much for your support. All the comments, all the financial support. We're getting tons of emails every day. We have the best community on YouTube. Thank you, everyone, for coming to yet another discussion with us. First thing I'd like to do is ask where you're all from. So leave where you're watching from in the chat. I see we already got one repost on X. Thank you, Teflon Don on X, for reposting our stream already. Okay, we're getting stuff from Los Angeles. Go Dodgers. Super Yoda 99. Hey, from Leesburg, Florida. San Francisco. Last week's show was my first. Loved it. Thank you, LNU clone. Thank you for stopping by. We collected over 60 questions this week. I have 51 of them, about 51 of them loaded up. We do have to do a little bit of triage and grouping, or else we'd be doing these question and answer shows all day. Okay, let me just check. Getting support. Again, more support from X. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you very much for reposting on X. Really appreciate that. Oh, getting more X reposts. This is really great. Thank you, X audience, for tuning in. I can't, X.com doesn't allow me to send you replies. Okay, so before we get started with our questions, any opening statements from Barbara or Susan? Anything that's on your mind you'd like to set the tone? I mean, we have a lot going on right now. Obviously, we still have the government shutdown going on. But then you have what happened yesterday with Trump and Antifa and domestic terrorism. And there were even some changes made in Portland last night where they actually, I didn't stay up to watch, but I believe the Portland police pretty much blocked off an entire area around ICE. You had some more moves coming in Chicago. I don't know if the National Guard eventually went in or not. So anything to begin the discussion with today?
I think we should just hear from our questioners and take it from there.
Okay, sounds good. So just so you get some background here, these questions come primarily from our email newsletter supporters. Both our free and our paid, our email newsletter subscribers. What I do is I put the link to ask a question in our emails throughout the week. Tomorrow, I'll be sending out an email that will have the replay of the show in it, and I'll put the link in there to ask questions for next week. So that's where primarily these questions are coming from. But we're also going to take questions from the chat. So if you have thoughts or questions about what we're talking about, please put it in the chat. So just for some background. Okay, so actually, I'm going to start with a question from a longtime supporter in Palmer, Alaska, Jerry, who's asking a question that I think a lot of people want to know about too. Hi, Adam, Susan, and Barbara. My question for this week is this. Would you please clarify the Jefferson, Madison, Hamilton triangle? I always thought that Jefferson, Madison were the good guys and Hamilton was the bad guy, so to speak. And now you tell me it was just the reverse? Indeed, why did Jefferson and Madison gang up on Hamilton and stab him in the back? I now feel like I've been brainwashed all my life about my own damn American history, to the point that I don't know what to believe anymore. Thank you. Sincerely, Jerry. Jerry, thank you very much for your very astute question here. So I open the floor to Barbara and Susan.
Well, I'll take the first poke at this. I think it's a really excellent question. American history has been, what's that old phrase? History is rewritten by the victors. Well, unfortunately, from the standpoint of epistemology, ideology, and history, the British have pretty much been the victors in the 20th century and into the 21st century in terms of rewriting history. their main tool has been a phony dichotomy. And I think this immediately gets to the importance of what Donald Trump is doing right now, economically, politically, and obviously also strategically with this extraordinary peace deal announced yesterday. Because what the British do is they kind of flatten out the fight. And they say the fight is between basically big government and little government. That is not what the battle was originally, and it's not what it is today. So taking that matrix, they basically say Hamilton was for big government and he created a central bank, and Jefferson and Madison were for limited government, and that's why they're good, and blah blah. Our friend Robert Ingram has written an extraordinary book on George Washington, which documents without a doubt that Jefferson and Madison were being manipulated by the British to support kind of radical Jacobin policies in the United States and to oppose very much, not only Hamilton, but very much Washington. And I encourage people to go to the toolkit on Promethean Action and look at Bob Ingram's book, which you scroll down, you'll find it, on George Washington. But the important point, which I think is critical for framing our people's understanding of what Donald Trump is doing, is that the issue of government is not big or little. The issue of government is, what is its intention? Is its intention to foster the productive powers of the population, to create the conditions where people can be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, and exert dominion over nature? Does it create the conditions where our posterity have the opportunity to live a better life than we do, which is how Americans have always thought? And that is not something that you measure from the standpoint of, if the government does it, it's bad. If the free market does it, it's good. And that's the infection, which is in most people's minds. What Hamilton understood, what Washington absolutely understood, and what Donald Trump understands, is that the government has a role in creating a climate to protect the productive powers of your workforce, to protect the productive intentions of your entrepreneurs and your manufacturers. That's why we have to have tariffs. You actually have to protect your manufacturing sector. That's why government has a role to play in terms of infrastructure, because you have to create the conditions like a highway system or water, public water systems and so on, where both individuals and, again, producers, entrepreneurs are operating within a climate in which they can make the discoveries, they can improve their productive process, and they can create a profit by doing so. That's the American system. And the problem people have with history is, as I say, it's largely been flattened out by this phony dichotomy of big versus little, freedom versus control, and so on. Obviously the issue of freedom is not, in a vacuum. You don't have the freedom to kill somebody. You don't have the freedom to be a pederast. You don't have the freedom to destroy your society. You have the freedom to be a human being and to be creative and to contribute to the future. And I think that's the fundamental question. As I said, our colleague, Robert Ingram, has done a brilliant job in terms of exposing the connectos of Jefferson and Madison, how intense the fight was between, again, Washington and Hamilton and Madison and Jefferson in his extraordinary book on George Washington, which I certainly recommend people get a copy of and read. But it's largely this epistemological question, which I think we'll keep hitting at today. Barbara, I don't know if you want to add something.
No, I really don't. I mean, the point is that all of the British historians of the American Revolution and, a quasi-British one by the name of Liz Cheney, actually, set out to say that Hamilton was a tool of what the equivalent of Wall Street, and that basically, Madison and Jefferson stood for freedom. And when you look at the actual history, you'll see emphatically that that was not the case. Jefferson, actually, wrote the Declaration of Independence, but then he changed drastically in his later manifestation. And I think what's implied by Bob's book is that Madison, who really didn't have a huge role in the Constitution, other than taking notes, so to speak, really killed or tried to kill every idea of national banking and other things which are important for our republic by saying that it violates individual freedom, which it emphatically does not. So I just urge you with Susan to read Bob's expose of this triangle, if you will.
And somebody in the chat wanted to confirm the title. Yes, it is called Washington's Republic.
Thank you. Excuse me. Sorry if I cough or clear my throat today, everyone. It is now ragweed season here in Northern Virginia. And even though I have my windows closed, I'm taking the allergy medicine, it still gets to you. Okay, I just want to give a quick shout out to Beverly Adams, who's been a longtime viewer. Thank you very much for your support. We really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to head to our next question here. Oh, before I do, please, everyone, just hit the like button. We have about 700 people on YouTube currently watching. I'd like to get about 700 likes. So if you're watching, please hit the like button. It helps us reach a wider audience on YouTube. Okay, so next question here. Thank you, Promethean Action Team, for your tireless work to bring us the truth. Would you please speak to President Trump's continuing to gush over how much he likes and respects Mark Carney? This doesn't make any sense to anyone who believes that Trump hates the globalists. What's his game here? There's got to be much more to it than meets the eye. Thank you, Laura, for your question.
Trump has he does diplomacy. And when you do diplomacy, you learn very quickly that rather than sticking your finger in somebody's eye at various points during a negotiation, which you very much like to do, you have to sort of make them comfortable and have a conversation. And right now, his big goal, I believe, is to set up a relationship between Canada, the United States, and Latin America in such a way that we eliminate the drug trade, which is clearly, part of the punitive tariffs against Canada around fentanyl, and that we actually, figure out a way to integrate Canada and Latin America into, once again, a North American kind of defense alliance and trade alliance, which I believe is his goal. Now, obviously, Mark Carney represents a whole lot of globalists, and he's made his career out of that, and he's an evil, satanic kind of guy. But it doesn't mean that, he is right now the guy you have to negotiate with in Canada. And Trump has his mind on the goal and where he wants to go, and all of the things, and he wants to basically push Carney into a corner, just like he did Netanyahu with his own internal audience to facilitate his goal. So that's what it's about.
Thank you, Barbara. I want to bring up a quick question here from our chat on an unrelated question at the moment, but I still think it represents. What would you say to people who say stop the wars on Venezuela and Ukraine?
Well, I'd say they're two very different things. Donald Trump is not carrying out a war on Venezuela. He's carrying out a war on the drug cartels. And the drug cartels do have enormous influence in many countries around the world, especially in South and Latin America, precisely because the imperial elite use this as a way of attacking nations and so on. So what Trump is doing in terms of that and the drug boats and so on, I think is absolutely justified warfare. Obviously, he's trying to stop the war in Ukraine, but he's not just dealing with Zelensky and Putin. He's dealing with a European elite led largely by the British and the French, with the entire NATO apparatus behind it, which is intent on keeping that war going. As everybody knows, this war could have stopped back in 2022 or 2023. I don't remember now, when, where Zelensky was ready to start negotiating with the Russians, and Boris Johnson said, no, keep the war going. So, this is not where you submit your wish list to Santa Claus and he fulfills it on Christmas morning. These are all very complicated strategic battles, which are being fought on many, many levels with many different actors and many different influences. The difference with Donald Trump and everybody who has come before him is he wants to stop the war with Ukraine. He wants to stop the carnage in the Mideast, which is why he's gotten farther than anybody else in the world in terms of bringing this to an end. That's the difference between Trump and everybody else. Previous presidents wanted to keep these perpetual wars going. But once you're in the world of Donald Trump, where you want to end a war, you have to recognize it's not as simple as saying stop. And as Trump himself has said, I thought I could end the war in Ukraine a lot faster than I could. But there's a lot more going on. And while he does say it, it's basically the Europeans who are preventing this thing from finally being forced to the table.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I see that our X audience is growing. Thank you. If you're tuning in on X.com, thank you for tuning in. Let me give a quick shout out to our newsletter real quick. If you've been watching us for a while, you probably already know this, but if not, we do have a daily newsletter. We're going to send you an email every day, just so you understand. There's so much going on in the world, and we have so much to say. We have a daily newsletter you can get for totally free. The link is right there. You can search the web for Promethean Action. You'll find our website. Just get our free newsletter. We'll send you an update every day. We do 3 political briefings a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Plus, we do a live question and answer show on Thursday. So we'll send you updates when we post a video and go live, and we'll send you text articles, written articles that we still do. Okay. So again, go to prom.ac. The link is also in the description, or search the web for Promethean Action, get our free newsletter. All right, next question is on Antifa and who's actually in control. Karlin Borisenko is a journalist that claims Antifa really is a decentralized group that is funded mainly through mutual funding and literally has no real leaders. If this is the case, then Trump will find that no big organizations are funding them. How do you fight a completely decentralized group like this? Thank you, Curtis, for your question.
Well, what you're going to find out is that Antifa is actually organized, and it's an import from the effort to put the German government into the European Union way back when the wall fell in 1989. And you had this group emerge in Germany, which was set up to completely destabilize the German government and force the issue by conducting terror attacks. And what Antifa stands for is anti-fascism. So, basically coming out of Margaret Thatcher's mouth in Britain and all over the place is that we never want Germany to become an economic power again. And so we did what we do, which is we deployed terrorists against them, street level, so that the government would be destabilized. They were actually probably involved in killing, major bankers in Germany at the time. It was an overall reign of terror. And it came here not incidentally, around the 2008 financial collapse and a little bit before. So it's been around for a very, very long time. And the funding, actually goes through, various cutouts from major foundations and Democratic Party funding groups. It includes the Open Society Foundation of George Soros. It involves a very specific, front group which uses dark money to fund these terrorist operations. It involves the Ford Foundation, the same people, in other words, who funded Black Lives Matter to the tune of millions of dollars to have a street crew who could basically engage in demonstrations. And then we found out later on that that street group, so-called, was actually being controlled by, the various people above to be the street gang to go into major national riots if Donald Trump actually won the 2020 election. So no, they're not an idea. They're not decentralized. They have pretty good what's called statecraft, in the sense that they have been able to sell the idea that we're just an idea to the FBI over a period of years, when it's clear that they're not. It will involve some very creative investigative techniques. And I think the forum which occurred at the White House yesterday will give people a very good sense of what it's really all about. You can pick that up on the White House website. I think it'll be up, if it's not already, within the next 24 hours. And it's a panel of people who've actually infiltrated the group and knows how they operate, et cetera, talking with President Trump about what to do about them. So that's how I'd answer your question.
Thank you, Barbara. I want to give a quick shout out here to John. Thank you for showing us all this. I love your news. Thank you, John. I hope if you've been coming around for a while now, I hope you get our newsletter. Make sure you're subscribed. YouTube and Google likes to play with like notifications and whether or not they show our videos in the feed. So if you get our newsletter, you'll have a much better chance of knowing when we actually post something new. So thank you very much for the support. We really appreciate it. Okay, on to the next question. Can Trump reroute tariff money to fund areas of the government during shutdown? Thank you, Greg, for your question.
I think the answer is we've got to solve the shutdown. He's got to. I want him to apply that tariff money to actual projects which grow the economy and deal with the enormous problems we're having left over from really the 2008 financial collapse and Joe Biden's desecration of the entire economy. So we've got to solve the government shutdown. I think that, basically it will be solved very shortly. And there's no reason to actually use tariff money to pay people in the government when the Democratic Party essentially is digging its own grave by hurting people who are federal employees. And so, no, I don't think I don't know that it is even possible, because I haven't seen the legal documents which actually, show up what these deals are. But I'm pretty sure that the money that's coming in from certain donors, it's specified it's got to go into infrastructure and other forms of growth, not into, funding the government in a Democratic Party caused shutdown. So that's how I'd answer your question.
All right, next one. What is Project 2025? Is Trump in support of this? Thank you, Evelyn, longtime supporter. I just like to say this. This came up, I believe, last week when I believe Trump mentioned Russ Voigt and said a Project 2025 fame. He said that in Truth Social last night. So I think that's probably where this is coming from.
Yeah, Project 2025 was the name of a project which the Heritage Foundation does every 4 years going into a presidential campaign, where they pull together top policymakers from across the political spectrum, and they draft certain policy initiatives, personnel initiatives, and so on. This became infamous in the Now, Donald Trump has nothing to do with Project 2025. People do the knee bone connected to the thigh bone, because certain people who Trump put in his administration, like Russ Vought, were among the contributors to some of the works in Project 2025. The Democrats tried to claim that this is Trump's blueprint. Project 2025 was a mishmash. You had contributions from people who were in favor of tariffs, but the overwhelming orientation of most of the contributors to Project 2025, because it is from the Heritage Foundation, is from the British free trade liberal standpoint. That is, all government is bad, everything should be cut, Social Security, Medicare, et cetera, et cetera. So the Democrats took that and they went to town. I mean, as I was driving around Detroit during the election, there were billboards that had pictures of Trump and Project 2025, and they're going to cut your Social Security, and they're going to cut their Medicare, and so on. It was used as a boogeyman by the Democrats. If any of you tortured yourself enough to watch the Democratic convention, you saw speaker after speaker walk up there with a huge volume, which they claimed was Project 2025, scream about it, throw it on the floor, and so on. It was total theater. Trump, as he said many times, had nothing to do with it, despite the fact that, again, people from his administration contributed some policy suggestions, most of which went contrary to the rest of Project 2025.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, we're going to take the next question. It is on the British Empire and the Five Eyes and how this is influencing the discussion of immigration in the United States. Excuse me, wrong layout. How has the enduring legacy of the British Empire through institutions like the Five Eyes Alliance and transatlantic elite networks subtly shaped U.S. political discourse on immigration over the past 3 decades? And to what extent do President Trump's 2025 border security executive orders challenge or reinforce this influence amid the escalating migrant crisis? Thank you very much, Mike, for your question.
Well, I'll take a first shot here. Open borders is a policy of the Open Society Foundation, the elites, and everybody who is identified kind of as a globalist. And the reason for open borders is twofold. One is to have mass immigration and actually overwhelm the institutions which can service people, as well as to suppress, which is the most important thing, wages, the wages of workers and producers in the United States, the wages of Americans. So, what the president is doing is he knows this, and the more we go after the authors of this open borders nonsense, including the whole business of sanctuary cities, what you might call a neo-confederacy in the states, in the Democratic Party controlled states about this. All of the present, crisis is caused by the fact that when Biden opened the borders, where did these people actually go? They didn't go or rest in Texas, although a lot of them did. Most of them went to declared sanctuary cities like New York City, like Chicago, like Seattle, like San Francisco. And so when you say, okay, now we're going to deport these people, well, that's where you're going to go. And that's where you're seeing this huge amount of violence occurring as the Democrats try and actually keep this policy going and charge Trump and ICE and everybody else over and over again as human rights violators. Okay, there is no right to cross the border, and be undocumented. It doesn't exist. And our laws very strictly say that we should be the people who decide who comes here and who doesn't. That's a power within the President of the United States. And Congress, of course, has been ridiculous about this and hasn't been able to come up with any kind of sound immigration policy, for a long, long time. So that is a lingering influence, but it rests with the complete endorsement of open borders by the British and by the transatlantic elites for purposes of suppressing wage growth, primarily in the native working class. and therefore it's really almost like a new slave trade. That's how I've characterized it in the past. These people come into the country, they're completely indebted to the cartels who got them here if they're coming from the southern border, and they're being engaged in a new form of slavery, and that's what this battle is really all about.
I just add, for those who might not know what Five Eyes is, it's an intelligence sharing scheme that's was set up between the United States, Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, the so-called English-speaking nations, which was used as a major point of subversion into the United States by British intelligence. It involved intelligence sharing. It allowed a level of spying which you couldn't have done otherwise, given domestic laws. Happily, Tulsi Gabbard has terminated U.S. participation in Five Eyes.
I did not know she terminated that. When did that happen?
The last month or two.
Really? Okay. The next set of questions are going to be on the government shutdown that's still ongoing. First is from Evelyn, longtime supporter. Thank you very much. Is this government shutdown during these governor election races a good idea? And this is from Lynn. Thank you very much, Lynn. During a government shutdown, are the federal courts functioning in full operational mode? If not, does that mean an executive order by the president cannot be challenged in a court during the shutdown? Thank you very much, Lynn and Evelyn, for your questions.
Well, I'll take a shot at it. The federal courts are not functioning in full mode, but they are functioning enough that the emergency docket, which is how all of these executive orders, are challenged, still remains open. And so you'll see the challenges go on. The second question really pertains to how all of this stuff impacts, a governor's race. For example, right here in Virginia, we obviously have a governor's race going on in Northern Virginia, which is kind of the voting bloc, if you will, for the Democratic Party. A lot of government workers have lost their jobs, not just from the shutdown, but from Trump's efforts to get rid of DEI and other nonsense programs within the government itself. So it's going to have an impact. But, I think that the scandal over this Virginia Attorney General candidate actually trying to, sending text that he wants to assassinate the former Speaker of the Virginia House, and also the children of the former Speaker of the Virginia House, and the Democrats' response to the extent that they are saying, well, we're not going to tell him he can't run. He's apologized and that's enough. Can you imagine having this guy as the Attorney General of your state? So I think that's going to overwhelm even the shutdown in terms of what happens, in the voting. And I think that's kind of how it's going to operate, perhaps in other states also.
Thank you. So Carol just sent in a message. No, she only revoked Five Eyes access to information relevant to negotiation with Russia prior to Putin and Trump's summit in Alaska. So we might want to check on that, Susan, because I didn't hear that she I didn't hear that she totally revoked Five Eyes, but I do remember this happening before that negotiation. Thank you, Carol. We'll definitely check that out. Okay, then Susan, you want to say anything about the ongoing government shutdown?
Well,
because it's a big topic that's still like,
obviously Trump, I think, as everyone knows, is owning the Democrats. The sombrero meme has become one of the greatest memes probably in American political history. And I think the Democrats are increasingly isolating themselves. It's becoming increasingly clear that it is the hard left-wing forces in the party, which gets you back to your George Soroses and the people who fund Antifa and so on, who are holding the feet to the fire of the Democrats. But to sort of tie that back to the governor's race, If you look at what's happening in New Jersey, which has been a solidly blue race, and now the Republican candidate is running neck and neck with the Democrat, because I think the Democratic Party, to the extent that it continues to capitulate totally to the hard left policies of the AOCs and the Gavin Newsoms, it is just eating away at whatever support it has in the United States. And I think we may see a reflection of that in the New Jersey race. But I think the important thing is, we have to, keep the pressure up that this is simply the United States being held hostage by the Democrats, and people are not going to tolerate it any longer.
Thank you. So I just went and looked it up. Went to the nationalinterest.org. So Tulsi Gabbard supposedly issued a directive weeks ago to the U.S. intelligence community that its information regarding the peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine will no longer be shared with the so-called Five Eyes, which have historically closely operated on intelligence matters. But we don't know how much this is being enforced, but supposedly Tulsi Gabbard did issue a directive. Okay. I got another super chat here. Thank you, Bill Vickers, Buckingham Palace Fund. We really appreciate it. Thank you from the support up north. And I'd like to give again a quick shout out to Melody Hart, who's been another viewer here that's been with us for the past 3 months. Thank you, Melody, for your support. We really appreciate it. We couldn't do any of this without our awesome community of supporters. So thank you very much, Melody, and thank you very much, Bill. Okay, so let's go on to the next set of questions. This is the longer one that you mentioned before, Susan. So I'm gonna paraphrase this one a little bit because it is long. Why can't Speaker Johnson state the government shutdown issues concisely? The main policy fight involves federal benefits for lawfully present non-citizens, such as DACA recipients and refugees, not for undocumented illegals who cross the border illegally. Both sides accuse each other of using the issue for political leverage, but the underlying definitions, while emotionally charged, are not the direct reason for the government shutdown. Okay, the shutdown reflects larger partisan divides on immigration funding priorities with rhetorical battles over terminology as part of broader public messaging. The 2025 Medicare eligibility changes enacted through a budget reconciliation law signed on July 4, 2025, removed Medicare eligibility for several previously eligible lawful present immigrant groups while retaining it for others. In short, the 2025 law on July 4th narrowed Medicare eligibility to mainly green card holders, human Haitian entrants, and COFA migrants, removing refugees, asylees, TPS holders, parolees, and trafficking survivors from Medicare coverage eligibility despite prior inclusion. Okay. Thank you very much for your question, Russ. I'm going to open this. I hand the floor to Barbara and Susan.
Actually, the problem here is that the Democratic Party is doing a very targeted kind of attack on the Trump base. When you actually look at eligibility for both Medicare and Medicaid, and you look at the supplemental Obamacare things, what you see is that states that Donald Trump carried in 2024 have most of the Obamacare supplement people in them, i.e. the American working class. Now, the White House is totally aware of this and wants to make a deal, but their contention, which is correct, is the Democrats are staging it to actually create a situation in terms of debt, which is ultimately unsustainable. And when you say that it's the asylees and other people who are, quote, legally present, you're right. All right, that's what it is. But remember, many people were were put here under Biden's various, ways of creating a right to immigration from people who simply had to, get their cell phone correct in terms of coming into the country, and they were allowed. All right. So you've added millions to the potential roles who could both get involved in Obamacare and could get involved in Medicare and Medicaid. And that's the issue. You're correct, but I think you're underestimating that little category there called asylees. All right. That was the major way which Biden essentially got a lot of people into the country legally. All right. And, it is true, as the Democrats say, that it's always been the case that people who enter the country illegally are not qualified for any of these programs. However, Biden arranged it so that millions came in legally, and they're legally present. So that's the rub, that's the issue. And the administration knows in terms of 2026 that it's got to come up with some solution for this. The Obamacare expansion, which occurred during COVID, with the supplemental and the raising of the income limits on, both Obamacare and also Medicare and Medicaid, means that someone who's making $60,000 a year as a single person now qualifies for Obamacare when it was intended to actually be for people who are at the federal poverty level. Now you've got a whole situation where people got into it because they didn't have to pay the huge costs of health insurance and got some relief from that. But our problem is the huge cost of health insurance and the whole way that the medical situation in our country is being run currently. So that's how I'd answer your question. It's a big issue. It's a tough issue. But the point is, if you always go back to what I think Donald Trump's agenda is, which is people first, I think you're going to see a deal here.
Thank you, Barbara. Let me just give a quick ask here. If you're tuning in and haven't yet given us a like, please drop a quick like on this video. It helps increase our reach to YouTube. And if you've been watching us for a while and haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please just go ahead and hit the subscribe button. We do 3 pre-recorded political updates a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And we do this live show, which you're watching right now, every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. So if you want to get updates or try and get updates from YouTube, because YouTube won't give you updates all the time, please just hit the subscribe button. All right, so the next question is going to be on the Comey case and indictments. So it's a really simple question. I'll get right to it. Sorry, wrong one. How far will the judiciary system get with the Comey case? And will there be more indictments? Thank you very much, Karen, for your question.
I don't know the answer to that. It's in the Eastern District of Virginia. The Trump administration has gotten no cooperation from the U.S. Attorney's Office there. It's a Biden-appointed judge. Yet Lindsay Halligan went in there by herself and got a grand jury of exactly this component, mostly Democrats and mostly government workers, to indict Comey. So you would think, well, they didn't indict him on one duplicative count. So there's all sorts of propaganda out there that the case is fatally flawed. You're seeing all the people who are, like Andy McCarthy, who are tied up with the Rhino wing of the Republican Party, saying the case is going to go nowhere. I don't believe that, and I think there will be more indictments coming, but you've got to recognize that there is a real war going on at the Justice Department from all of the holdovers and the various U.S. attorneys' offices. Again, Lindsay didn't even have a paralegal she could get, and so she went to the grand jury herself and did all the work herself and is sitting in the trial counsel chair herself right now as of Comey's arraignment. And this particular district, the Eastern District, we know very well, I know very well, that's where the Lyndon LaRouche case was tried with all sorts of corruption involved in it. And, so I don't know how far this is going to get. I also don't think we actually know what the government has at this point. Comey's defense team is kind of guessing that it all evolves around his friend Daniel Richland, but I don't think that that's really the case. So we just don't know. It's a toss-up. The issue which was, facing the Justice Department is, do we let him skate on this lying to Congress charge because the statute of limitations is up? And where can we get appropriate venue and jurisdiction? And unfortunately, to one of the places they could do it is DC, which is where all of the Trump prosecutions, the J6 prosecutions, the wild insurrection by judges is the native stuff. The Eastern District of Virginia is just a little bit better. So we just got to see.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, next question is on the financial system. Actually, let me do the quick super chat shout outs. I want to give a quick shout out to Karen. YouTube told me this is your first time watching us, being with us. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please make sure you like, subscribe the video. And like I said, if you really like what we're saying, please get our newsletter. The link is in the description. You can just search the web for Promethean Action. You'll find our website. Our website's, it's super obvious how to subscribe to the newsletter. Just make sure you get our newsletter. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And thank you very much, our friend Paul from across the pond, who's been watching us for quite a few shows now. Thank you very much for your support. It really means a lot to us. All right, so the next question here. Okay, are Trump, Scott Bessent, Peter Navarro, and Elon Musk using AI and quantum computers to avoid the 2 quadrillion derivatives bubble blow up? Thank you, Wayne.
Well, I'll take that. Obviously, they believe that AI and quantum computers are going to add a huge boost as tools in the actual drive to increase labor productivity. But I don't know that they're thinking of it consciously to say, oh, that way we avoid the derivative bubble blow up and other forms of potential financial crisis, which are very much upon us in terms of the economy, which, Joe Biden left us. You're seeing, the beginnings of a mess, it appears to me at least, around the so-called private credit market, and derivatives, make no sense at all in terms of anything other than having a hedge for protection, but they're being used, basically to build a bubble and to sustain a bubble. And I think the overall strategy that Trump and Bessent have is we don't want to blow up the whole system right now. It's a very delicate surgery, however, a very, very delicate surgery. They're challenging the Fed and trying to get the Fed into line with American system policies, or at least limit its jurisdiction. Clearly, the strategy being pursued by the Fed and others is to, get rid of the debt through inflation, and then try and inflate their way out of the debt, at least as it stands on the national income roster. But again, this is delicate surgery, and you've got to basically increase your productivity massively at this point, so that you have the funds to, get this debt increasingly, off the books, so to speak. So that's how I'd answer it. I don't know that there's anything other than that in what they're talking about in terms of AI and quantum computers.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Wayne for bringing up the fact that there is a $2 quadrillion derivative bubble out there. For everybody who gets freaked out about the federal deficit, which is a problem, and don't realize that you have a gambling casino market out there of $2 quadrillion of nothing. It's like side bets on side bets on side bets on side bets. And it's real. And it's like a cancer totally intertwined with the rest of the system. How to begin to dry that out is one question. The other question is, how do you create alternative sources of actual investment funding to do what Barbara mentioned? What we've got to do is we've got to get the productive economy going. We've got to shift away from this financial gambling casino way of running our economy into how do you channel productive investment so that we can rapidly build up our manufacturing capabilities in the United States, provide the kind of good paying blue collar jobs where one income can raise a family. That's a part of the equation that people don't think about enough. And I know the administration is thinking about it. I know they have various kinds of new institutions that are kind of being spun up to begin to get this question of how do you get the money out of the bubble, the real investment money, not the funny, not the gambling, nonsense, but how do you get real investment out of this speculative bubble, which was the only place where you could, quote, make a profit recently because of the way the system is rigged. And how do you get it into the productive economy? And I think they have that. I think that is something which is being very, very seriously investigated in the administration, and we're going to keep our eye on it.
Thank you very much, Susan. I'd like to thank all of the people in the chat. We're slowly attracting a much better chat audience. And thank you to everyone who's been coming back and actually talking about some much better stuff than when we first started and we had all the trolls in here. Okay. The next set of questions is going to be about Promethean PAC. So respected your deep knowledge, and I feel so ashamed for my ignorance. So much for me to learn, and I think I don't have much time to absorb all the information. Where should I start to gather the basic information about current politics so I can discuss them with my children, etc.? Thank you. I think it's Latin. Next one, how can we neutralize the left-wing propaganda machine? Apart from encouraging our friends and family to subscribe to Promethean newsletter and YouTube weekly posts, the incessant lying from the media is ridiculous. Not a day goes by that some new falsity is spun up like the Tolkien spider. Thank you. Thank you, Rita and Tampa. And the third one here is, does President Trump know about Promethean and how to help and the help you are giving him in the background? If not, I think he should. Most people are not aware of the truth behind most of his decisions. Thank you, Cheryl. And thank you, Cheryl, for the kind words.
Well, basically what we're trying to do here in the initial, I'll handle the electoral questions first, because it's very, very necessary at this point that we create a Congress which can actually legislate Donald Trump's agenda. On the other side of it, if the Democrats succeed in winning the House, then you're going to have chaos even worse than what we've seen before. And that's the fundamental battle here. How do we actually win the 2026 midterms? We have a half-page flyer.
Adam, can you share the screen?
Which Promethean PAC is putting out. I'm waiting for it to come up. And what it goes through is, what are Trump's actual policies, which are truly something most people never think about when they think about the Republican Party. Like they might think about Mitch McConnell, who is definitely not MAGA, or they might think about other Republicans in the Senate and the House who are not really on board with this agenda. But this is Trump's agenda for the 2024 election, and everything he has been doing is to essentially create the basis of that agenda. His primary audience is not the old Republican Party, the Country Club Party, the party of Wall Street. His fundamental audience is the American working class and middle class, and he is doing every single thing he can to give them an economy in which they actually thrive and prosper. So that's what people don't know. And so our first go around in terms of actually getting clear to people what he's doing as opposed to the lies in the media is with this short flyer, which we invite everybody to make a contribution, take some, really think about it. And the way to find out about what the president is doing, other than what we're doing here on Promethean PAC and Promethean Action, is to go to two sites. One is called one is the White House website, okay, which gives you not only the president's policies, but the factual basis behind them in terms of factual briefings, which you can use to, argue with your neighbors, etc. Think about, do your own research. There's also a X site called Rapid Response 47, which we do all the time, which actually is an answer to the lies in the media and everything that's coming at you directly from what Trump is thinking about these issues. So that's our run-up as Promethean PAC to 2026. We want to saturate the country with what Trump is actually doing to fulfill his promises. And we think that enough people really actually understand this, discuss it, talk about it with your friends, neighbors, go out and get involved in election security and other things, which there's multiple places to do so. We have every opportunity to win the midterms, but that's the goal of Promethean PAC at this point, to win the midterms by a massive educational campaign. And, if you want to help us do that, please go and contribute to Promethean PAC. Adam will put where to go in the description.
Susan, didn't you have some videos and stuff?
Well, yeah, I don't have video, but let me switch now back to the Promethean Action hat. Because again, we have our Political Action Committee, which will be directly intervening into campaigns, which is what political action committees do. But Promethean Action is the policy arm, which is what hosts our YouTube webcasts and so on. And this week, Promethean Action has done something really dramatic. We sent a team, and I will get to some, here we go. We sent a team of, I think eight organizers, maybe more, up to Capitol Hill for an entire week. They are up there with our ebooks, what the American system can do, what Donald Trump can do with the American system 2.0, our police dossier on It's the British Who Murder American Presidents, and with this new flyer, which we will put the link to this in the description and the notes once we post this tomorrow. It's also available on our website. It's a little hard to find. We'll have to fix that. But this is a terrific flyer which demonstrates what Donald Trump has already done with his creating the United States as a manufacturing superpower. So our mission on Capitol Hill with all this literature is to meet with as many offices as we can. We have met with, probably as of Wednesday night, I would say close to half of the offices of both senators and congressmen. In many cases, we're having substantive discussions with the staff. Let me go the other way. Going through what Donald Trump is actually doing, because here's the funny thing, and it may, it's not so funny because I think a lot of you are experiencing this as well. A lot of people support Donald Trump, including many, if not most, of the Republicans on Capitol Hill. Many of them actually don't understand the fundamentals of what he is doing in terms of the economy. It gets back to what I referenced at the very beginning. People are caught in this big government, little government world, which is just, it's like a cartoon. The real world is, how do you jumpstart your physical economy? How do you dry out the speculation? How do you end the destructive policies like the green insanity and woke policies? But just ending the bad stuff is not enough. Again, you have to figure out, how are we going to start to get productive investment rapidly into our economy so that we can reshore the factories quickly. We can start to get the spare parts, the supply chains back here in the United States. One of the things we ran into is a lot of small businessmen are in a bind right now because we haven't reshored our entire supply chains. So they're still having to buy parts or supplies from overseas. They are getting hit with tariffs. They do have to, pass some of that on or absorb it and so on. What's the solution to that? The solution to that is not to get rid of the tariffs. The solution to that is, how quickly can you get this economic development going in the United States? Now, one of the really fascinating reports we got, which I suspect is going to shock everybody, is we've had meetings with a lot of members of the Western States Caucus in the Congress, which includes both Democrats and Republicans. And what we're finding is, with some of these Democrats, not the crazy woke ones, but with some of these Democrats, they are actually excited about economic development, about shipbuilding, about reshoring, about bringing productive jobs back to the United States. And they're actually working with their Republican colleagues to figure out how to do this. So what we're finding while we're up there is that there is a growing potential for Congress to actually start doing something useful, to actually begin to back up Trump's thrust for productive economic activity. And that's been the basis of our meetings, which have really been quite extraordinary. We've had substantive discussions with many offices in both the Senate side and the House side. We still have a day and a half left. We'll be there through Friday afternoon. And when it's all over, we're going to give people a full report on what we've found, and also maintain contact with the offices that were most receptive to what we had to say, and help them shape a more effective intervention into Congress. So I wanted to share what Promethean Action, our policy arm, is doing, because again, we have a 1-2 punch. We have our direct electoral intervention into the midterms, which is what Promethean PAC is doing, and it needs your support. And we have our ongoing policy intervention, where I think more than anybody, we are explaining to people, including congressmen and senators and their staff, what it is Donald Trump is really doing. And of course, we're explaining it to the American people. That's absolutely critical. That's the foundation of everything we have to do, including how we can win the midterms. So people who support Promethean Action with contributions or paying memberships are supporting this kind of organizing activity. One of the things I like to say is, we don't just analyze, we organize. And I think you're going to have to look far and wide to find another organization that does what we do.
I agree very much, Susan. I think that is one of the unique angles that we're coming at this issue of world politics from, is that we have history, decades of history, acting in both the international and the national United States domain. And we're still, we probably still have one of the most organized street organizing forces across the country in the Republican operation at the moment. So that's definitely one of the angles that we're coming to you with, is the fact that we actually do political organizing. We're taking the political action. We're trying to be in Congress. I I spent at least 4 years of my life lobbying Congress in the mid to late 2000s with no checkbook and doing it day after day. And that's kind of the history of our organization. Okay, yeah, we're more than just commentary. And I want to give a quick shout out to 2 super chats here. Thank you, Tiga, for your support. We really appreciate it. We can't do any of this without our community. And thank you, Basil. The truth is coming out of the barn, connecting the dots, unstoppable worldwide, reaching critical mass. Bravo, Prometheans, for assistance. I'd like to thank you for the support too. We really appreciate it.
Adam, I have to prompt you from the chat because someone has basically given us a commercial announcement. Barnes Homestead says, need a shirt that says, I'm Promethean MAGA.
A Promethean MAGA shirt?
Yeah.
I'm working with a supporter right now to come up with some new t-shirts. So hopefully that'll fill it. Thank you very much, whoever said that. I wasn't. Oh, here we go. Yes, thank you very much, Barnes. We're working on some new t-shirts. I also have this one. It's pinned. It should be in the video somewhere. This is for sale, my Einstein Stay Creative shirt. Einstein is probably the most important probably the greatest scientific discoveries coming into the 21st century, the 20th century. And those were I wouldn't say discovery, but his formulation of both theories of special and general relativity, but more importantly, his contributions to the photoelectric effect and the field of quantum mechanics basically gives us all of the technology, is the basis for all the technology we use today. So it's my little homage to Albert Einstein. Okay. Next question is again on this question of DC. We have a special election going on right now to replace our congressional representative, Mark Green. What state is that in? Mark Green, who resigned. I'm working for the most Christian conservative ultra MAGA candidate, and Trump just endorsed the Rhino phony MAGA candidate. We have worked so hard against so much dark money flowing into this election. What explains how they get it so wrong in DC? What state is that
It's
in?
Tennessee, if I'm
Okay.
not wrong. I'll answer that. I don't know the particulars of that case, but we've seen a similar thing here in Michigan over the last several cycles, where the grassroots is very, very invested in in what they consider to be a very strong MAGA candidate. But the fact of the matter is, especially now, I can't speak for Tennessee, so I don't know the demographics of this particular race. I've been surprised by some of Trump's endorsements over the years here in Michigan. But then when you take a step back, Trump is facing an existential situation in 2026. If we lose the House, he will be impeached. Lawfare will begin. And it will be, the Trump revolution is going to be dead in its tracks. One of the, concerns that you see in the business and economic community is, okay, I want to pivot to Trump's America First policies. But how do I know it's not going to all go back to the way it was in 2 years? So this election is absolutely existential. And again, I can't speak specifically to this Tennessee situation, but I can tell you what I've concluded from similar situations here in Michigan, which obviously is a critical swing state. Given the population of the state of Michigan, some of these very strong MAGA candidates would simply not win because while they hit many of the right buttons in terms of the passions of the MAGA crowd, including on a lot of the social issues, their focus is a little too constricted to actually win vital elections such as the ones we have here in Michigan. Now, the solution to that is getting more people who actually fully understand what Trump is doing, because there's a lot of people who are pro-Trump and pro-MAGA and grassroots and running, And while they are pro-Trump, they actually don't understand what Trump is doing. You know, they still fall for some of the, again, hot button issues, which the Democrats so much love to exploit, issues which Trump doesn't fall for because he's operating from a higher standpoint. So I think Trump is making calculated decisions from the standpoint he cannot afford to lose the House. He's got to hold the Senate, and he's obviously got to increase the margin in the Senate. You know, for him to really be able to effectively govern after 2026, we need 60 Republican senators. That's a pretty heavy lift, but we need it. And I think what we have to do is we have to just constantly lift up the understanding of the MAGA base to what it is Trump is really doing. We may not have all the candidates we want in 2026. My attitude is, as long as they don't stab Trump in the back when they get there, we can live with it. I'm thinking in a longer term strategy that we've got to educate and find a better class of candidates coming up through the ranks at all levels: state legislator, county commissioners, state Senate, Congress, and so on, where you actually have an educated MAGA movement which understands the American system. That's the problem. If you don't understand the American system explicitly, or with Trump, certainly implicitly, and you sort of fall back to some of the right-wing talking points, the Democrats are going to exploit that. And again, we cannot afford to lose these midterms. So again, I don't know the specific situation in Tennessee, but from my experience being in the trenches in Michigan, sometimes you just sort of have to take a deep breath and say, Trump is looking at a much bigger battlefield and making his decisions from there. And the more that we are playing our role, educating the population and creating a better quality of candidates, perhaps down the road, the faster we'll advance Trump's strategy.
Barbara, do you have anything to say on this question?
I just want to say that, based on what Susan has told me about things in Michigan, what's really interesting is that Trump is changing people. And the election in November of 2024 changed people. If you would have looked at the Congress and the Senate as it existed in 2024, you would have said to yourself, how in the hell is he going to get anything done? How is he going to get anything done? And yet he's managed, because of what you guys did out there in creating the too big to rig election. People see that and they say, okay, I got to adapt to that. I can't swim against the tide here. I've got to emphasize to you that the categories you put people in, are not necessarily going to hold once they actually get to Washington if Trump gets another too big to rig election in the midterm. These things are not just some kind of messy thing that happens once a year. All of these politicians have to take them into account in terms of where they stand on issues and everything else.
Yeah, and I'll just elaborate a little on what Barbara referenced. I mean, I've seen people who ran for office in 2024, and to be quite honest, they were gag-worthy. I mean, completely artificial, nothing real about them. Their campaigns, were just your typical establishment Republican campaigns, talking to the country club set and so on. Some of those people are running again, and they're running completely different campaigns. They're actually running Trump campaigns. Now, have they changed? I don't know. I'm not in the confessional with them. But what has changed, as Barbara said, is we've created a different political environment where people have to be more like Trump to even think about running for office. And if those people happen to win elections because they presented themselves as Trump candidates, you can bet we're holding their feet to the fire.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. Let me just give a quick shout out to the show here. If you're just joining us, please give us a like. It helps us. It helps our reach on YouTube. If you've been watching us for a while and enjoying it, please subscribe to our channel. We do 3 political updates a week plus a live show. And then if you're really vibing with what we're saying, I urge you to get our free newsletter. The link, you can go to prom.ac or just search the web for Promethean Action. The link is also in the description. We're going to send you an email every day. We always have something to talk about. We always have some new research to share with you. So please get our newsletter and stay up to date with what we're doing. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of a detour here. I'm going to go to some questions on the British Empire and their control. I think this is an important issue that we always get questions about. So let's start with this one. How does the British financial empire maintain a coherent and stable strategy over long periods of time? I think that's a very good question, because we see that their strategy has morphed and changed over hundreds of years, yet they still have us in their crosshair. So how do they maintain that strategy through generations? Okay, let's check the next one here. Has the British East India Trading Company morphed into the British financial Anglo-Dutch banking, or was it a tool that was used by the imperial powers that has since been replaced? It seems to me that it was the primary moneymaker for the empire at the time. Also, why was there an English and Dutch East India Trading Company? Because actually, the problem that we're dealing with in England actually came from the Dutch. Why were they competitive, or was that just a tool used to evade legal questions? No, that started with I think it was called the Glorious Revolution, when the Dutch monarchy came over and took over the British monarchy. I don't know the details of that. I'm sure we're going to have some people in the chat that would talk about that. But let's start with these 2 questions on the British and how are they able to maintain their strategy over generations and over centuries.
Well, I'll start, and I'm sure Barbara will have her own spin on this. Jeff really kind of hit the nail on the head. They maintain their control over generations through 2 things. They set up institutions, and they control ideology. And one of the institutions that Jeff has pointed to is these kinds of financial and trading institutions. Specifically, toward the end of his question, if you actually want to track the evolution of central banking, what today we see as the Bank of England and our own Federal Reserve, you have to go to Venice in the 15th and 16th centuries, which is where many of the Roman families relocated. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. It's fall here. It's fall here too.
Yeah.
It's ragweed season in Michigan. But it went from Venice, and then they shifted to the Dutch. So you had central banking move from Venice to the Dutch. And when you got to the Dutch, you had both central banking and the Dutch East India Company. And then they moved across the English Channel to the British. And that was largely a result of the fact that the Western Hemisphere was opening up, and you needed to be able to have that kind of opening going to the West so that the imperial forces could continue to control the world. So they set up those kinds of institutions. As long as you're going to have central banking, you're going to have control of this imperial elite. So I'm going to leave it at the financial side. I suspect Barbara might want to address the ideological side.
Yeah, if you actually take a look at how the modern British financial empire has, survived, it's actually more than adequately described as the 3rd British Empire. In other words, you had the British Empire, which we fought against up to the Civil War. They supported the South in the Civil War. And then they realized, kind of coming as age, that holy cow, we can't afford to be policing the entire world of all of our colonies. How are we going to adapt? And they had a very coherent strategy towards that. One is institutions. We want to take over the educational system in terms of history, in terms of what's written as philosophy, in terms of who is our favored philosophies. And you see this huge rewriting of American history. And not only that, we want to reabsorb the United States into the British Empire. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to convince them that the fight against communism actually means that they have to provide the military force and take over all of the British bases and everything else throughout the world. And we have to seduce them into becoming the policemen of empire. How do you do that? Well, you actually educate an entire generation by blocking out the ideas which led to the American system, and creating false ideologies, if you will, as to what life on this planet is really all about. And they've been very successful in that. If you look at their strategies, they say that what they call soft power, elite capture, actually capturing the elites to follow their philosophies rather than the philosophies which led to the American Revolution. That's how they maintain their power, because ideas are physical. They're not just out there somewhere. And how you think about our history, which most people don't have access to the real history, except for the books which we've written about them. I would, basically, there's books by Bob Ingram in our toolbox concerning, central banking and the history of empires. There's a book by Will Wirtz called Beware the British East India Company, which actually goes through this history. And there's a very, very provocative, but I believe accurate book by Richard Poe, which actually says how the British created communism and blamed the Jews. And if you get into that work, it's actually taken from a lot of work, frankly, that we did in the past concerning the British Empire. And he's got great original research extending the reach of that thesis. So that's background, which I think is essential to every patriot. And, controlling how you think, what axioms you actually use to think about, hypothesize what's going on in reality. That's where they're fighting this war at this point. They're not fighting it with weapons or anything else. And they've been very, very successful up to the point of Donald Trump, who comes back and says, no, we're going to actually pursue true American history. And we're going to actually re-educate Americans about what our revolution, about Abraham Lincoln, about all the things which are unique about this country. And if we do that, then that whole imperial scheme falls apart.
Thank you, Barbara. I'd like to go through just a few quick super chats here. First from BW, again, love your black hat. Let's play that SCOTUS doesn't let us down on October 15th. What's going on October 15th? Does anyone know what ruling's happening?
There's so many cases on the Supreme Court docket at this point that I haven't looked at that are critical for our survival. So I'm not sure exactly what oral argument is going to come up. Decisions don't normally come up on a certain date because they're being decided. But no. What comes up is oral argument. So I'm not sure.
So he just responded. It's the racial redistricts, the racial districts. So the 15th is when they're going to be ruling on that. Yes, we all agree that's definitely going to be part of decision of what happens in the next election for sure, in the next elections. And also another longtime supporter. Thank you, brother. Adam asks peeps to smash that like button. Everyone do me a favor, smash that like button. Thank you very much. And I just got served a liberal ad for the GA candidate Ossoff. Kind of weird. Well, you have to know how advertising works on the internet. Sometimes when you place your ad, you can only really place your ads on political videos. It won't always tell you what side of the thing. So I'm glad they're spending our ad money on us, and thank you for putting up with the ads. This is one of the only places where we run ads because it helps sustain our operation. So thank you everyone for putting up with the ads. And thank you, their campaign, for spending money on us because we get a part of that. Thank you, everyone, for your support. Yes, please smash the like button. Please subscribe. We do 3 political updates a week. Plus, we do this live show every Thursday. So we're going to have some more questions on the UK and what's going on there. I want to make sure I get the right next one here. Okay, number 25. Next one is on the king here. With everything going on in England, how does the king fit into this narrative? Thank you, Patsy. And I'm going to take the next one here too, which is close. Hi, is it possible royals across Europe and the UK will be exposed? Thank you, Mark, for your question. So Patty and Mark, thank you for your questions on the European and UK royals.
What I emphasize, this is all soft power. The British Empire has created these ideologies, which we've been talking about, including the ideology that somehow men and women are lesser people on this earth than Mother Nature. And the World Wildlife Fund for Nature, the whole kind of taking over of Africa as the modern British looting ground for the City of London. The King and Queen play a role in that around certain types of clubs and consensus building organizations, like the Club of the Isles, for example, in the far-flung British financial empire. But the key issue is ideology. And the king plays a major role in all of the environmental movements. He played a major role in all of the new, what we call the new, genetic fascism, which has come into being through identity politics and other things. So they're not just ceremonial. They are kind of critical to giving luster and a permanent kind of psychological warfare in the population around worshiping kings and queens and all they're doing. I mean, when I look at my feed any given morning, it wants to tell me about Elizabeth's secret tunnel, which was in the news today. Do I care that she went in a tunnel to go get a quiet lunch away from the press? No. But the point is that's all publicized, so it allows people to live in this kind of fantasy world of kings, queens, princesses, and what have you, without actually looking at the hands and feet of what they're doing. The World Economic Forum is a good example in terms of an influence operation around, apocalyptic climate change, which led to all of the green stuff we actually have. But more importantly, environmentalism has been used as a kind of tool to really subject most of Africa to British capture of raw materials and other things for the City of London. So that's kind of the thing I see. Susan may want to add to that.
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, the monarch, think of the monarchy not as the person, think of it as an institution. I'm sure everybody remembers the old, I think it was probably the first James Bond book on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Did you ever let that sink in? On Her Majesty's Secret Service. The Secret Service is run by the monarch. And again, I stress the fact that it's an institution. The intelligence of any particular monarch may go up or may go down. Many people have commented on the intelligence of the current one. But even with that being said, he's also displaying a much more open, hands-on role, not just in terms of the green ideology and this pagan ideology, which Barbara referenced, but he's also playing a much more open role in terms of foreign policy. He's met with Zelensky twice. He recently met with the president of Moldova, while NATO and the EU were ensuring that the opposition parties were basically iced out of the current elections so that Moldova could stay in the camp of NATO and the globalists. So, it's often been commented that his public meetings with foreign leaders on foreign policy questions is unprecedented. And I think it just is an example of the fact that the monarchy as an institution is a vital part of this globalist operation.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. I have some super chats here. First, thank you, DG, for coming and joining us again. We really appreciate your support. Love your little cat with sunglasses profile picture there. And Things I Wonder, thank you for the support. Without the support of our community, we would not be able to do the YouTube live broadcast. We would not be able to do the newsletter. We really depend on your support. So thank you very much, Things I Wonder. Okay, next question is, how does this connect to the United States? Okay, I've seen X posts about American presidential figures being linked by family to leaders past and present in the UK, namely Bush, Obama, and the Clinton families. Is this true? Thank you, Celeste, for asking another question and for joining us again. Barbara and Susan.
Mute myself. It certainly is true in terms of George H.W. Bush and the Bush family, who played a major role, through Prescott Bush. You start there with funding the Nazis in conjunction with the British. With respect to Obama, George Soros was the first guy who ever funded him, and basically picked him up as a senator. Clinton, well, that's all about dirty money and getting rich, and a lot of it comes from the British Empire. But it's not a family relationship; it's a institutional relationship.
Thank you, Barbara. Next question is an honest question we get a lot, so I think we need to answer this very honestly and to the point. Hi, love your work and insights. I'm curious about why there is not much said about Q anymore. Can you explain what Q was or is? Thanks. Keep being amazing. Thank you, Douglas, for your question. This is a question that constantly comes up, so I'd like Barbara and Susan to address it.
I really thought and think that Q was a psyop, okay, which was out there to convince people, at least from a certain content standpoint, that President Trump has everything under control. You don't have to worry, and you don't necessarily have to get involved, and you don't necessarily have to do anything to save the country, because it's all wrapped up, it's all under control. And that was really pushed prior to the 2018 midterms. And the result was that a lot of people actually believed that and stayed home. So that, to me, was the defining point about what Q actually was and the effect it seemed to have on people. It pulls you in by inviting you to become part of the conspiracy for the good. And that's a good thing. But to the extent that it actually said, well, listen, everything is cool, and Q is, controlling things through some kind of mechanism, which you're never going to know, it tended to actually make people very passive. And we don't need people to be passive. We need people to get active. We need people to get out and organize. We need people to actually go out and figure out how they're going to help win the 2026 midterms. And whatever information is being pushed to them by Q, in my view, should be largely ignored, because we've got an opportunity to actually change the country rather than being wrapped up in the musings of various people on the internet, which send you nowhere. So I know that's controversial with a lot of our people out there, But I think if you think about what actually happened in 2018, you'll see my point.
Yeah, let me add one other side to this. Whether it's Q or whether it's your favorite, YouTube personality and so on, I want you to always do a mental check after you've watched or read something. Did you come away with the idea, as Barbara said, that everything is under control and there's really nothing I have to do about it? There's mysterious people under the floorboards who are wearing white hats who are going to take care of it. Or alternatively, or we've got the midterm elections in the bag because the Democrats are being crushed right now and so on. I mean, shoot, it's true. Democrats are taking it on the chin. But if anybody thinks we have the midterms in the bag, they don't understand what we're up against. So that's the one side. If it leaves you feeling passive from that standpoint, the other standpoint is if it leaves you feeling like there's nothing you can do about it. They're all in control. They control everybody. Trump is controlled by the Jews. Trump is controlled by Palantir. Trump is controlled by, the banks or, the billionaires or whatever. If it leaves you feeling like there's nothing you can do because they are all powerful, either one of those, you might just want to think about why you're listening to that. Because the issue from now through November 26th and into the future is a mobilized and educated American population, which, thank God, for the first time in my lifetime, or at least since John Kennedy, has a president who is in position to actually bring down the British Empire. And the question is, what are you doing to actually help him do that?
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. Okay, I'm going to take some more questions now. These ones are going to be on immigration and, again, continuing on the UK because we have so much support in the UK. What's going over there is so terrible. So we definitely need to keep addressing this. What, if anything, can President Trump and his administration do to stop the UK government and Starmer destroying the UK and stop it from becoming an Islamic state? Thank you very much, Barbara. Do you think Nigel Farage will change politics in the UK as Donald Trump is doing in the USA? So let's start with these two because I think they kind of overlap a lot. What are the parallels here between the United States and the UK, and what can an American government do to intervene about the craziness that's going on in the UK?
I'm pretty sure that Donald Trump has already told Starmer that he's crazy in terms of immigration, and he has to take Trump policies to actually save the England and Scotland and the rest of Great Britain. He could actually cut the special relationship, and that would be wonderful from my standpoint. In terms of intelligence sharing and other things. Do I think that Nigel Farage is a new Donald Trump? No, I don't think so. Donald Trump is really a unique personality and can't be replicated, in my humble opinion, by any of the other politicians I see on the world stage. So we've always functioned here in terms of foreign policy by setting an example for the world. That was John Quincy Adams' idea about what our foreign policy should be. We straighten out the United States first, which is a huge task, and other nations will tend to pick up by their citizens demanding that something similar happen there. So Starmer has an approval rating which is absurdly low. And the best thing I think that British citizens can do is to essentially rally around people who are using the same idea of, stopping illegal immigration, stopping the kind of cultural destruction which exists with that, and getting behind massive economic development, not NATO, not defense spending, as the British are presently doing, because of their view that they have to continue the war in Ukraine. And so you just got to get active, and you got to understand what Trump's doing here, and you got to try and demand it from every person who is actually running for office in Britain.
Susan, any comments?
Well, I'll just make one other point. You know, it is more of a challenge for our friends in the UK and other countries that are under parliamentary systems. There's something very beautiful about the American presidential system, which gives us so much more power. Because we elect a president, the entire population elects the president of the United States. The presidential system is one of the great things that our founding fathers created, which has allowed us to find a Donald Trump, an Abraham Lincoln, a Franklin Roosevelt, you know, the kind of unique individual who can represent the actual interests of the nation as against the imperial controllers and so on, and pull us back from the brink of disaster. Parliamentary systems are more problematic, which I guess means you're going to have to work harder, because in parliamentary systems, you don't elect a leader, you elect a party. So it means that you've got to actually create some kind of party institution which is going to reflect the policies that we're all fighting for, and hope that out of that they generate figures who will then serve the interests of the people. But it is a tougher road to hoe in parliamentary systems, and I think we have to acknowledge that and figure out what we can do internationally to constantly break the grip of this global imperial elite and give a little bit more breathing room to our friends in European countries and elsewhere to begin to take control of their particular institutions and move them in the right direction.
Thank you, Susan. Got some more super chats. Thank you, Yvonne, for tuning in every week and joining us. Thank you for your support. We really appreciate it. Again, from Basil, Kennedy Secret Society's repugnant speech referred to England. Anyone know that what he's referring to? Maybe JFK made some comment when in England. I'm not certain.
Oh, I think he did. At least there's reports that he gave a speech which went after the secret societies. I myself have never read it. So
again, thank you for your support. We really appreciate it. Dognose, thank you again. The explanation was on QAnon. This is a thing that we really need to overcome in MAGA. We need to take people out of literally political soap opera and move them into the domain of actually organizing strangers, trying to communicate deep ideas with strangers. So we have to get you out. We have to get people out of the political soap opera world. Again, Jeff in Utah, thank you for tuning in again. Thank you for your support. BW, again, thank you. We have to save ourselves before we can save the UK. Too bad. Well, I think you need to have a better attitude on that a little bit, is that what's going on right now is definitely a worldwide phenomena. And I think we're getting to the point where we're either going to sink together or we're going to swim together, right? If we continue this MAGA thing that's happening in the United States to 2026 and 2028, the situation for the UK looks really good. Actually, for all countries, it's going to look really good. But if we lose in 2026 and 2028, I can tell you it's going to look grim across the entire world. So I approach it much more from the standpoint that the UK, Canada, even though we can't necessarily directly influence their election, we're all in this together. We're all trying to fight this globalization crap. So that's what I have to say. Thank you, BW. Thank you, friend LJB Asgal. Thank you very much for your support and for tuning in. Please make sure you've liked the video and subscribed to our channel. And I'm going to take one in here from Amy. I heard Tucker C is in the Pilgrim Society. Can you tell us about that? And are the Brits behind his change of his views or info? Barbara, can you say a few things about that? Because I think I think you like Tucker. You do follow him a little bit, I think.
I think that Tucker has been threatened, by the various, people who are against the MAGA movement, and it's part and parcel of an overall effort which is going on right now to tear up the coalition, which Trump actually created in 2024. And he's particularly vulnerable because he comes up against the fact that he doesn't really have the intellectual background to see how these things come at him and why. Is he in the Pilgrim Society? I don't know if he's in the Pilgrim Society or not. The Pilgrim Society, for people who don't know, was a specific soft power institution set up by the British that actually still exists. And it is really part of how they do what I call elite capture by having various people enticed to join it to have an increase in influence regarding financial and other matters in the world. So I don't know if he's in the Pilgrim Society. I don't think that's what's behind his, temporary kind of insanity around both the Charlie Kirk assassination and Trump's relationship to Israel and what he calls the Israel lobby. But he's very familiar with all of that. And, I'm curious about the fact that he doesn't actually go more directly after the Murdochs. And that particular relationship, I think he may be under a non-disclosure agreement based on when he left Fox. I just don't know. But the overall impression I get is he's scared because he's been threatened. And he doesn't react to that very well because he doesn't have the kind of courage which Trump has and the kind of background and knowledge, as he himself said, I'm just a talking head here interviewing people who I find interesting. I don't know a whole lot of stuff. And that's when you get threatened and you don't really have the background to fight it, you see the kind of change in attitude that actually comes with that. So that's how I would diagnose it from a couch, which really is just speculation on my part as to what's going on with him.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And thank you, Amy, for tuning in again. We really appreciate the support. We hope you get our newsletter and subscribe to our channel. Okay, I think the last two things we're going to address is first, this is another topic. We addressed Q. Now we have to take up another question that also comes in. And we should treat this as an honest question. I think this is. The Jewish cartel is not a myth. The Brits are definitely a force to pretend there is. The Brits are definitely a force, but to pretend there isn't a Jewish mafia controlling our officials is a blatant lie. Thank you, Kurt, for the question. I'd like Barbara and Susan to respond.
No, the Jewish cartel is both there, all right, in the sense of a certain power formation, but it's not the controlling power formation, which is where you make your mistake. There are various Jewish people who were involved with the mafia, Meyer Lansky's group, for example. There are various Jewish people who function on Wall Street in terms of just go through the leading companies and you'll see that there are a number of Jews who are very powerful on Wall Street. Then there's the Rothschilds, okay, who are very powerful in Europe and also here. But are they a cartel with, do they all agree with one another? Do they actually represent the Jewish religion is a key question I think you've got to ask yourself. And if you study the history, you'll see that the British Empire has used the Jews, a certain class of them, for financial matters and for their intellectual talents. Does it mean that they're the people in charge and in control? Absolutely not. Second, you're seeing right now, if you look at what I call the social media mind control warfare, which has gone on with respect to Israel and this 2-year war, what you see is this idea that, there's a Jewish lobby and they're all powerful. There's also a Ukraine lobby, which has an enormous amount of power in Congress. They have access to a lot of funds, which politicians use in their races. But again, the reason why they want to assassinate Trump is because they can't control him. What you're seeing today in Israel and in the Middle East as a peace plan should prove to you that whatever power you're attributing to this Jewish mafia formation is not in power in the world. You neglect, when you actually think that way, the enormous differentiation, which is Israel, the enormous number of people who actually oppose Netanyahu's actions in this war. And you're creating a myth, which the British have always created, to shield their own actions by giving credit to the Jews for doing it. And again, I highly recommend Richard Poe's book, which gives the whole history of how this mechanism has worked.
Thank you, Barbara. So let me just give a shout out to Richard Poe and his book. I think everyone should probably begin to read it. The book is called How the British Invented Communism and Blamed It on the Jews. That's literally the title of the book. If you just search for that, how the British, I think it's How the British Invented Communism and Blamed It on the Jews. If you put that in there, the book is by Richard Poe, and it'll come up. Big shout out to Richard Poe. I hope maybe one day we can get him on the show here. All right. I want to ask some questions that are coming up about Pfizer and Trump's medicine deal, because this is a big deal and people are asking questions about it. This week, Pfizer struck a $70 billion deal with the U.S. to expand its mRNA empire. The vaccines were the cause of numerous injuries and deaths. So why has Trump made this deal with Pfizer? Thank you. And hello to you two great ladies. Thank you for all your contributions to us all. My question, why is President Trump associated with Pfizer? They have a history which has not been dealt with. I understand it will mean cheaper drugs for the American people. So thank you, Essie, and thank you, Lee.
The first issue is a national security issue. If you actually look at what other countries could do at this point, if they decided to deny manufacturing of drugs to the United States, and they actually said, like China did during COVID, we'll just stop sending you medicine and you'll drown in coronavirus, okay? What Trump is trying to do is reshore all of these manufacturing capabilities of the pharmaceutical companies. Pfizer was the first in line. And no, it's not just about mRNA, which obviously is a very controversial subject. It's about the fact that Pfizer makes numerous life-saving drugs, and they're being charged in America for them much more than they are elsewhere. Take Eliquis, for example, the biggest blood thinner on the market, which for older people is the key to not having a stroke or not having a heart attack in many instances. That's made basically overseas at this point, and it costs you, $300 to $500 for a month's supply presently. So if we kept on the present trajectory, we could face a national security threat from either India or China, where most of these drugs are manufactured at this point. And we also could face the total bankruptcy of Medicare and Medicaid, because the drug budget is so huge in both of those entitlements. So that's why he brought Pfizer in, and Pfizer agreed that it will reduce the prices of its drugs across the board. And that's an enormous win for seniors and other people who depend on a lot of these drugs to continue to live. Yes, Pfizer has a terrible history. And, it's been involved in numerous lawsuits for marketing things, under false pretenses. but that doesn't mean that they also haven't invented and created a great many breakthrough drugs, which are vital to saving lives.
Susan, any comments?
Not on that.
Okay, I'd like to give a quick shout out to PGK Dan. Great contentment, I think, great content. Thank you. Thank you, PGK Dan. We really appreciate the support.
We're greatly content too.
Yeah. Okay, I cashed in all my bottles, cans, and other recyclables and just signed up as a Patriot. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. Bill from Canada, we appreciate your support. I don't know if there's anything we can do to help you organize Canada. We have so much support from up north. Is anything we can do to help you guys build an operation, or anyone, please reach out to us. Let's see if we can work together on doing something really awesome. So thank you, PGK Dan. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you like the video. Consider getting our newsletter. And thank you very much, Bill, for the support. Okay. I was just going through the quote. We have some people that are really, really, really insisting that we are running cover for AIPAC. They clearly, okay, if you think we're not running cover for AIPAC. We just did a video on them a few days ago, actually. So I can assure you, we're not running cover for AIPAC. All right, let me get to some more questions here, because we have just a few more minutes left. And we've taken like a little more than half the questions. We have a bunch more good ones in here. Okay, so I'm going to give me a second here. Okay, here we go. Have you heard about a group being led by Ronna Romney McDaniels that is trying to take the state back from the current Michigan GOP 501c4? Millions pledged to it by the DeVos Family Michigan Forward Network. Thanks. Susan?
Yeah, you bet, Karen. Yeah, there's a new I guess it's a PAC that's been created in Michigan, which is largely composed of uniparty, well-off figures who are not at all happy that the Michigan Republican Party is currently in the hands of people who aren't controlled by them. But I mean, people may know I happen to be one of the vice chairs of the Michigan Republican Party. The party is moving very much in the right direction, I think, for the first time in a long time. There are continuing efforts to sabotage it, including constantly finding debt from the past and throwing it on top of the party so that it doesn't have the maneuvering room to move forward. But it's just a straightforward political fight between the actual Trump movement in Michigan and what some of my friends call the legacy party of Wall Street and War, which doesn't want to give up their control. But I'm pretty confident we're going to win.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, next question. I'm a new subscriber, and when I'm feeling so scared about what is happening, your reports always make me feel better. My question is, how do we know that Trump is not a Judas goat and is part of bringing about a one world government, and that he is going to turn on us and deliver us into their hands? He seems very pro AI and AI currency, which could lead us right into exactly what has already happened in the UK, while everyone was focused on poor Charlie Kirk's memorial. Please forgive my ignorance in these matters. Thank you very much, Debbie, for opening up to us and sharing your concerns. I open the floor to Barbara and Susan.
Well, the only way you can assure that somebody isn't going to turn on you is by getting active yourself and building a movement. And that's exactly what Trump has done. And he has a relationship with the American people which is very direct. He hears from people. He hears what they're saying. He knows what the problems are. And the very fact of what he was put through, I think, proves to you that he's the real deal. And just think yourself, would I, if, basically I was, first of all, impeached as president, first of all, accused of being peed on by prostitutes in a Moscow hotel by the director of the FBI, if I was subject to a criminal investigation based on my contacts of trying to bring peace with Russia, then, they came after me and tried to take every single one of my businesses away, to bankrupt every single one of them, put my former controller in jail on hoaxed up charges, raided my home at Mar-a-Lago, and then on top of that, tried to kill me twice and are still trying to kill him. What do you think that, don't you think that that record actually shows you something very, very different in this guy than any of the Judas goats we've had in the past, most of whom would have folded in a minute based on that kind of adversarial, attack. So that's why I think he's the real deal. Not only that, he actually is advocating the American system, which I've advocated all my life as the way to bring the United States out of the economic mess we're in. He's also directly taken on the globalists and said that at the United Nations that the future belongs to the patriots, not the globalists. The future belongs to people who are builders, who are optimists, not pessimists. And if you think about it, what's been spread all over our entire nation for the last, 50 years is a form of cultural pessimism where you're being taught not to believe anything or anyone. And that if you believe in someone, you probably are deranged. And that's what he's been up against. So that's why I think he's the real deal.
What she said.
Okay. I'd just like to bring up Socrates. Socrates says you can't really know anything if you're not able to act on it and bring it into actual existence. And I think that kind of applies here. You probably know deep down inside your heart that Trump is actually not Judas and that he is actually the real deal. But until you start trying to make that a reality, until you start trying to organize and talk to other people, it's not a real idea in your mind. And the media is so powerful. Mass media combined with these devices, these little tiny screens or these televisions that we carry around with us all the time, you're not going to be able to think clearly in a world where the media is putting all this crap in your mind all the time. The way you hear your own ideas is by trying to bring them into existence. So I urge you to start organizing more often. Start trying to convert people. You don't have to be an asshole about it, but ask some serious questions. Talk to them. Give them examples, right? In doing that, I think you will discover that Trump is the actual thing, not a fake. Not a fake. People like to talk about J.D. Vance and Trump being replaced by body doubles. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Any closing remarks for today's show? I personally want to thank everyone that's in the chat now because our chat is getting way better. I only had to really kick one person out of the chat today, and everyone else has been much better and more respectful. So thank you, everyone in the chat. Barbara and Susan, any last words for today?
Well, I'll just say one thing that didn't really come up is obviously it did in somewhat in response to some of the questions, but I think people should just be thinking about what it is that Donald Trump is on the verge of pulling off in the Mideast to give you a real lesson in statecraft and a real lesson in courage and a real lesson in not falling for the labels and the categories which are used by the empire to continue to control things. You think of all the things that are said, about Trump. He's controlled by the Jews, or on the other hand, he's anti-Semitic because he's going after George Soros, and he's this and he's that. What you're seeing unfold in the Mideast is what happens when you have a world historic individual who is committed to his principles. Those principles are anti-imperial, and is committed to actually accomplishing something in the real world, rather than checking some box like I'm in favor of a Palestinian state, like the British did. Actually solving the problems as an American president. And of course, the final T's are not crossed and I's are not dotted, but it does look like Donald Trump is about to pull off something which nobody else in the world could pull off. And I think it's well worth it for people to try and think as much like he thinks in terms of how he did this, and how you can take that same method and apply it to the other political challenges before us.
I think Susan summed it up for me. Again, around this peace in the Middle East, I highly recommend that people take a look at Barak Ravid's book called Trump's Peace, which deals with all the work in his first administration, which went into creating right now the opportunity for a true peace in the Middle East.
All right. Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. Again, I'd like to thank all of our supporters in the chat that have been coming back every week. Just final shout out for the channel and our newsletter. We do 3 political briefings a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. We do 1 live question and answer show every Thursday, which we're doing right now. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. YouTube hopefully will give you a notification. And if you really want to stay in contact and stay in touch with what you're with what we're doing, final shout out for our newsletter. The link is right down there. It's prom.ac. The link is in the description. You can search the web for Promethean Action. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see